Hey guys, if you need a visual representation of anything we've talked about in this video, we have a gallery put together on our website, thetruthaboutcars.info. Thanks again.
Welcome, listeners, to the second episode of The Truth About Cars. I'm your host, Tyler Kerr. Sitting across from me is my producer, John McManus.
Yes, sir.
The topic of today is oil changes. I know what you're thinking. I know what an oil change is. Oil changes are the single most important serviceable item that you need to take care of on your vehicle. It might seem like an outrageous topic because it's something so ubiquitous and everybody's been in for an oil change, but maybe you don't know the mechanics of why or what or how or who, and we're gonna cover all of that. We all know what it is. The used oil from an engine is drained from the oil pan by removing a bolt and letting it drain into another container. The oil filter that has used its serviceable life is removed and replaced. The oil drain plug is put back in and new oil is added to the top of the vehicle. The number one problem that engines face is friction, and friction is bad. Oil coats the metals inside of your engine with a microscopic layer that is oftentimes no more than 10 microns thick.
How much is 10 microns, though?
That is a great question, John. 10 microns is about 1/10 the width of a human hair, or the droplets of water that come out of a mister are anywhere from 70 to 350 microns in diameter.
My God.
So,
what the hell?
10 microns is very, 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 very small. There are 1,000,000 microns in 1 meter, and 10 of them is not a tremendous amount of space. This micron layer coats the metals of the internal bearings. Internal bearings inside of an engine are also made out of metal. A lot of bearings are made out of rollers that slide and move past one another with an internal race and an external race, but inside engines, bearings are actually made of several different alloys, depending on the application and the manufacturer.
Really?
Yeah, there can be brass alloy bearings, there can be steel alloy bearings. If oil wasn't a factor, these bearings pressing on the several surfaces that they do, whether it's the camshaft, the crankshaft, the connecting rods inside the engine, they would fail within seconds. So what the oil does is it fills the space between these 10 microns or less and provides an area for the metal on metal contact to float upon one another. What you end up having is a oily coating that keeps everything slipping and moving and also removes heat and engine deposits and reduces oxidation. The problem here is that any contamination is bad. Tiny microscopic pieces of metal are flaking off. That would be an issue, except that thankfully, engineers have incorporated what's known as an oil filter into this system. Which is great, right? There's stuff shedding off the engine, there's dirt and water inside the engine crankcase, and it gets caught in the filter and everything's okay, right? Not necessarily. An oil filter has a serviceable life. Depending on the manufacturer and tier or grading system of that filter, it will last more or less miles. The problem is, let's say you've got an oil filter that's only rated for 5,000 miles worth of contaminants, and you hit 5,001 miles. The oil filter is used up, the contaminants are all trapped, but suddenly, with this blocked filter, oil isn't being sent from the oil pump to the passageways that it should go to. Engineers know that humans are fallible, and we forget things. So what numerous, and when I say numerous, I literally mean every single oil filter manufacturer has done, is included what's known as a bypass valve.
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah.
What's a bypass valve?
When your filter is clogged with contaminants and is no longer properly filtering oil, the pressure in your oil system begins to drop. This bypass valve, when the pressure starts to drop, will open and allow oil to circulate to all the journal bearings that would normally end up running dry.
Okay.
The problem with this is that now your filter is not filtering out microscopic contaminants. So your engine is recycling dirty, used oil to all its components. The crazy thing is, there's a lot of factors, not only with the oil themselves, but the oil filters that can have an impact. And we'll get into that in a second. But those of you who listened to my first episode, you will recall that I had a fun fact about a gentleman named Charles Goodyear. If you didn't listen to it, you should go back and listen now because you don't want to miss it. If you're a nerd like me. If you're a regular person, you can probably skip it. But the fun fact today is that the W in the viscosity of the oil does not stand for weight. And what I mean to say by that is when you look at oils, there's two numbers. Well, now, there didn't used to be 30 years ago, but there is now because we have multi-viscosity oils. When you see the rating 5W30, the 30 stands for the weight of the oil measured at 100 degrees centigrade or 212 degrees Fahrenheit, dropping via gravity through a capillary tube.
Wait, what? So you're saying the temperature dictates the weight of the oil.
The temperature dictates the specific flow resistance.
Oh, the viscosity. Okay.
The viscosity, the flow resistance of a specific oil.
All right.
But what a lot of people mistake is the first number, they assume the W after that stands for weight. So 5W30, people mistakenly assume means 5 weight 30.
But it's really weight 30.
It is.
Okay.
It's weight 30. And, well, at operating temperature, which is 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
But the W actually stands for winter.
Winter. Freaking winter.
5W30 oil.
5 winter 30 oil.
Is 5 winter 30 oil. And the meaning of that is that they have added polymers and friction modifiers to the oil itself so that the flow rate at 32 degrees is 5. So 5 winter 30 oil flows more freely at 32 degrees Fahrenheit than 10 winter 30. Which is why cars used to take 10W30, but now most take 5W30, and of course there's 0W20, 5W20, 10W40.
All over the place.
We won't get into that because that's a whole other topic by itself. But basically, the fun fact is the W stands for winter. So next time you're at your oil place and somebody says, well, your manufacturer recommends 5W30, you can go, well, I don't really need 5W30. I can use 10W30 because the W stands for winter. And we live in the South where it stays warm year-round.
Boom! Boom! What's up, mechanic? What are you gonna do?
Over the last century, lubrication technology, like all technology, has changed rapidly by leaps and bounds. And if you don't believe me, ask, anyone who was around in 1990 if their cell phone is still the size of a shoebox. Lubrication technology has multi-levels and multi-grades and multi-viscosities. That's a lot of multis. How am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to use? Well, basically, there's 3 types of oil. There's conventional, there is semi-synthetic, and there is full synthetic. Conventional is almost exactly what it was 100 years ago.
Okay.
It's pumped out of the ground, they filter out the dirt,
refine it a bit here and
put it
there.
in your car.
Okay.
There it is, conventional oil.
All right.
Now, you've probably heard somebody in your family say that your oil should be changed every 3 months or 3,000 miles. They're not wrong. This was true in 1971.
1970? Oh no.
Back when vehicles used all conventional oil and synthetic, honestly, hadn't been invented yet. Conventional oil has microscopic dirt in it. Because no matter how we try, we cannot filter every possible contaminant out of it because the molecules that make up the polymers of oil are larger than the microscopic pieces of dirt that are also floating around in the oil.
There's no way to filter them.
No way to filter it purely.
Okay.
I mean, you can filter it excellently, but not purely. What happens is this contains impurities, like the dirt, like the minerals, like the other dinosaur bone-related items that came out of the earth that made the oil. And when you put them into a car, they break down over time and reduce the effectiveness of that 10 micron layer that we've been talking about so far. So you need to change that oil and that oil filter in that car using conventional oil every 3 months or 3,000 miles. Thankfully, once upon a time, some scientist in who knows what laboratory decided that they found out the way to solve this problem by creating synthetic oil from conventional oil.
From conventional oil. And how did they do this?
Magic? I don't know. I'm not a chemist. So basically what happened was they've figured out ways to separate the molecules of oil and use catalysts to recombine them into perfectly identical clone molecules of one another. Now, semi-synthetic oil is literally exactly what it sounds like. It is conventional oil that's pumped out of the ground and filtered, mixed with synthetic oil, which is synthesized from oil that is pumped out of the ground. When you get these blends together, the idea is that you get the benefits of a fully synthetic oil while retaining the cost benefits, aka the cheapness, of conventional oil. The only issue is that the API, which is the American Petroleum Institute, states that to be considered a blend oil, an oil need only contain 5% full synthetic stock to be considered a blend oil.
So you could have 95% conventional oil.
You could have 95% conventional oil
and
with
5% synthetic.
Synthesized synthetic.
And it's synthetic.
And it's a synthetic blend.
Semi-synthetic.
Semi-synthetic. Industry standards relatively dictate that's an 80-20 blend.
Okay, so they're not totally usually
They're not totally usually screwing.
Okay.
But I'm skeptical, and I'm trying to instill some skepticism that's healthy into our listeners. And personally, I think it's probably closer to the minimum requirement than it is to the maximum.
Oh, no.
But that's just me. I have no proof. That's conjecture and hearsay. I'm not a journalist.
It would make sense, though.
It would make sense, though, because money's involved, right?
Fuck.
Whenever money's involved, there's a little bit...
For sure. It's a penny here,
So, what's the difference, you're asking?
Yeah,
well,
what is the difference?
Synthetic oils, fully synthetic oils, I should say.
That's what I run in my WRX.
You should.
Good.
They don't break down over time.
Ah.
Well, they do, but to a lesser extent.
Okay.
So whereas conventional oil has impurities in it, fully synthetic oil is perfectly uniform and has no impurities.
Ooh.
So
it's pure.
Whereas conventional oil can only last 3,000 to 5,000 at most miles. Full synthetic oils can last up to 12,000 miles.
Dang.
Or more, depending on the application. And again, we will get into that very shortly. Oil changes differ from each vehicle manufacturer and each oil manufacturer and each oil filter manufacturer. But the broad strokes are conventional, 3,000 miles, 3 months. Semi-synthetic, 5,000 to 7,000 miles, or every 6 to 8 months. Fully synthetic, 10,000 miles or once a year. And here's a huge asterisk, provided the filter is matched.
Ah.
And what I mean by that is there are cheap filters that don't filter as well or for as long because they have less filter media to save money.
Okay.
And they are not rated for 10,000 miles, but I'll touch on that later. There's not a lot of lies floating out there. It's hard to lie about oil. It's not too expensive. The difference between a conventional oil change and a full synthetic oil change is maybe 20%. It's not like 100% increase in the cost of 4 tires versus 2 tires. It's kind of just degrees on a scale. Most of the problem that comes from the oil industry is misinformation. Manufacturers design and build cars. These manufacturers and the engineers therein also designed the engine with what oil is the best oil to run in that engine. They didn't just throw parts at a wall and go, you know what, you could probably put 15W40 in it and it'll work.
They knew their product.
They knew their product. They knew that they were building a Subaru engine with XYZ tolerances and it needed blah blah oil because otherwise XYZ. My point here is that there's no reason to upgrade from whatever your manufacturer recommends goes in the car to something that some guy at a Quick Lube says. Who are you going to believe? The engineer who designed and built the engine, or a person whose job it is to increase overall sales by selling more expensive oil?
That's well put. That's very well put.
You've heard this on our first episode, and we're going to bring it back because I think it's hilarious, but John, if I asked you this following question, what would be the answer?
Okay.
When in doubt,
Bust it out.
and what are you talking about, John?
I'm talking about the owner's manual of your car.
The owner's manual of your car. When in doubt, bust it out. Your manufacturer know what goes in your engine. Buy what the manual says.
And why would you do that over potentially having to change it a lot later? And maybe saving more money, because you said it was 20%.
So that's actually a great question. It's false. It's a false correlation to say this oil can last longer, therefore you can allow the engine to last longer.
Okay.
Just because an engine oil is designed by its manufacturer not to degrade over time doesn't mean that the components of the engine
aren't going to degrade over time.
Aren't going to degrade over time.
So it's almost more so a rating of the engine.
It's a rating of the engine
oil.
Versus the oil.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
They both, it's a dichotomy, right? They're both related. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
But there's no reason to quote unquote upgrade just because some guy thinks he knows more than the person who designed, and when I say person, I mean team of people who designed the engine in the first place. I would just like to get back to filters for a second. Thankfully, there's not a lot of industry tricks, just misinformation. And now that you've listened to the deep dive section of this podcast, you have what I would consider a reasonable amount of knowledge to not fall for the same tricks. All of that is to say, what? That was a lot of freaking information. Well, a 2017 study in the American Journal of Engineering Research puts it in the most blatant terms that I could possibly think of. Change the oil when the manufacturer recommends and using the appropriate grade, meaning conventional, semi-synthetic, or full synthetic, and using the proper viscosity. There's not really much more that you need to do to make sure that your engine runs the way it should. If you made it this far in the episode, I really appreciate you sticking around because you're who I'm trying to reach. And I hope that this helps you in the decision-making process next time you're getting your vehicle maintained. Save your money, do what's needed, and don't do anything extra. As always, we've got more systems to cover coming soon. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe. I'm Tyler Kerr, and thank you for listening to The Truth About Cars.